Ahoy! Today we're talking about the patch notes for patch 8.8, the Ceaseless Whirlpool, the Charybdis release. We're going to have another video on Charybdis specifically later where I show abilities a little bit more. So we're going to keep that part relatively short and look at everything else on the patch notes because there's a lot of big stuff here, a lot of exciting stuff actually, outside of Charybdis as well. A quick overview for Charybdis though. Her passive is similar to Poseidon's. You have a tide that builds up that increases your attack speed. And she has unique basic attacks, which have 3 hits very quickly after each other on the third basic. That has reduced on-hit effects by 35% for like Kinsai's and Odysseus' bow. She stacks 2% tide per basic attack, so it takes about a second up, and that's the passive. Her first ability is a line amplifier for the basic attack, so it's a steroid essentially, but the basic attacks are wider and faster while this is active, which lasts for 4 seconds, and have some sort of spike explosion, splinter explosion, when hitting a wall or hitting an enemy guard. Then the second ability is a cone slow/damaging ability that hits enemies in an area in front of her, but if you have more tide, then you can charge it wider, so it can basically almost be a half circle in front of you and hit a lot of enemies. Technically can be used for clear as well that way. Then her third ability is a whirlpool form that makes her untargetable, and she can go under the surface basically of the battleground, and she is this giant whirlpool with teeth inside of it. And she moves a little bit faster, I think, during the normal form, 20% faster, but you can amplify the ability by pressing the button again, and then you move 40% faster, sorry. You use 30% of your current tide, and that also increases the damage that you deal during the ability, and it gives you some exit damage where she knocks up when the ability ends. So basically almost 2 forms of this ability entirely. Think of it a little bit like Pele's 3, but also a little bit different because it has this final knock-up effect on it, and she can't be hit while using it. So very, very interesting. And then the ultimate, the Mahungas, is somewhat similar to Scylla, but also very different. It's a line attack in front of you that pushes enemies back, and at the end of the line attack is a wide cone, and this cone is where she does a bite attack, or the Maw rather does a bite attack that will deal high amounts of damage and will stun enemies and will reset if an enemy is killed during this, again, like Scylla. But you can also use the Maw as a closer range without the knockback part, without the line part, so you can kind of vary the distance. Again, I'll show all that in more detail with some visuals along with it to explain it better shortly after this, well, a little bit later after this, once I finish editing that video. But I figured I wanted to bring this out first, so I have a little bit of time between the 2 videos. So, I think she sounds very interesting. I think she looks very easy to play on a basic level. You have to be good with positioning. That's the dangerous part, but her abilities seem to be very easy to hit, and her basic attacks are also easier to hit than normal hunters. So that's very interesting, which might make her a bit more scary, considering obviously she won't be completely balanced at the release. So we'll find out where she lands. We'll look into that a little bit more later, but I do think that she is design-wise a very cool god when it comes to the kit. I think that is something that hits the spot between accessible for most players, but also having enough unique mechanics that it doesn't feel boring. And with that, let's jump into the god skins. Now these 3 you've already seen if you watched my video yesterday. These are just the skins for the bonus balance. But this time, there isn't really a bonus balance in the same sense because all the big changes are coming together. So we already had this one bonus balance before, and that's why this patch is so big and has so many relatively big scaling changes, balance changes, and all that stuff. Then we have the Charybdis skins here, Whirling Waters, Ascended, Mastery skins, of course. And then we have the other normal skins of this patch. Mystic Magus Ra, very similar to the already existing Anubis skin. Also a more human version of him. Kiro Danzaburo. Danzaburo's a frog, really cool, really cute. Toon Mania Cthulhu, insanely good. Let me actually try and open that real quick a little bit, just because I want to show it bigger again. You may have seen this already if you watched the other video that I released on it. And here you can see all the forms. And actually all the forms are in the skin very frequently, because he changes form whenever you use an ability. The first ability gives him the cowboy form. The second ability keeps him in this form. The third ability puts him in the pilot form, and he has a little plane with which he flies forward, so he doesn't use his wings. And this is actually his VXG. He actually turns into, well, this greaser guy in a car during his VXG, and stays in the greaser form when he gets out of the car afterwards. And the car can like spin around and can honk and whatnot. That's all just the VXG, so really, really cool. The skin has so many cool effects. Like, for example, when an enemy hits you, when you hit an enemy with the Insanity effect, you become black and white for them as well and stuff like that. Really cool. And then the ultimate is the form here in the background, obviously. So that's all really nice. I highly recommend checking this one out because honestly, I think this is the best skin that SMITE has ever had in terms of animations, effects, what's happening in the skin, and how stylized it is in a really good way. Really, really impressive. Then we have another really, really impressive skin, and that is Neith's biggest fan, Zhong Kui. Zhong Kui as Neith, literally. It's fantastic. Then we have Valhalla Weiss Heimdall, a bit more of an edgy, cool skin. Also looks really, really cool. And then we have the super edgy, super cool skin, Classic Bacchus. I know a lot of you have been waiting for that one. And then we also have another edgy, not so cool skin, Draconic Devastator Thanatos, and Sakura Android Neith. And then we have Malwarm Jormungandr. What's really cool about the skin is it's like a bug skin, basically, a glitch skin. So his entire body is made out of error messages. It's like Windows saying fatal error over and over. And the entire skin glitches out in between. It has this visual glitch effect, like cyberpunk stylized, basically, where you just completely like everything about him just twitches and has like weird color effects and stuff. It's really cool. So I really like this one as well. I think this is a nice approach to Jormungandr. I think it's pretty hard to make good skins for Jormungandr. That is like very different from everything he has, but at the same time also works well with like scaling up into the bigger form and everything. So I really like the approach here, and I could see them doing similar skins for other gods with massive transformations, like Fafnir, for example. I think that could work pretty well as well, or Cthulhu. So that's the skins. I don't know what would be here normally if this is just a glitch, but it's like that on every browser, so I'm guessing it's just a bug. And then we have like the Code of Midnight event here on August 10th. So that is basically the bonus balance part, and then the big patch on the August 24th, the next bonus balance in next month. There is some stuff about ranked leaderboards getting a fix. So this is coming in the future. Then we have various minor bug fixes to, well, a lot of stuff. Some item interactions that were not working, like for example the range of Leather Cowl. Mannequin Hidden Blade, once again, the text now update, it correctly describes the percentage damage as of maximum health, not current health. That's always how the item worked, but basically it wasn't meant that to work that way, but it feels more balanced working that way, so that's why it's like that right now. And it was dealing incorrect percentage damage anyways to jungle bosses and minions, so that was fixed now as well. Charon's Coin was providing 15 HP 5 rather than the intended 7, so that gets a little bit of a fixed nerf through that. And Charon's Coin will be tackled a little bit more later in this patch as well. Chinese Joust, the Season 3 Joust map, is returning. I know I made a poll on this a while ago, if you remember, on my YouTube, asking which one you like best, and the overwhelming majority preferred the Chinese Joust map, especially over the Season 1 map, but also over the current, or like the newest map, not the current map. The current map is the Classic Joust map. This will be replacing Classic Joust. This will be the Joust map right now. And me personally, that is a very good change. I like that map the best. I always thought that was the nicest looking map, the most vibrant map. Right size, could maybe have some small tweaks here and there, but overall what I like the best. And as such, I'm very happy about this. It's also getting some balance changes though, which are in my opinion good. So Death Toll and Benevolence are unavailable to buy on this map. Good. The XP split bonus is increased from 0.0 to 0.65. So that means that generally you're going to level a fair bit faster, which I think is pretty nice. And there's also out of combat speed boost from the fountain during the setup phase. So you get to lane quicker just at the start of the game. And the intros are shortened basically so that the camps can now be attacked during their intros, which is also nice. Then the damage camp now uses the Jade Corruption Tiger skins. And some sound effects have been reduced in sound. So not many big changes, but some nice balance tweaks to make this a little bit more smooth and polished, I would say. Very good. I really like this. I think this is a good choice. I wanna jump into that again. I feel like that's the Jaws map I want to play. So with Conquest, there are also some changes here. I actually missed reading this before. Buff drop rules, averted pickup behavior. Picking up an enhanced buff with an enhanced buff equipped. Normal and enhanced effects are refreshed. Picking up a normal buff with an enhanced buff equipped. Normal effects are refreshed. So not the enhanced effects removed. And picking up an enhanced buff with normal buff equipped. Normal effects are refreshed. That is actually interesting. Pick up an enhanced buff with normal buff equipped. That would mean that you're not getting the enhanced effect if you have the normal effect. That's odd. Why is that? Why would you not get the enhanced effect if you pick up the enhanced buff? Very weird. Support buff will no longer freeze the lifetime duration of enhanced buff effects, but only the normal buff effects, I guess. Jesus, that's a weird read. Okay. I guess. So they say we want each round of enhanced buff to be unique. It's unique to this gameplay loop. In the previous system allowed players to keep enhancement much longer than intended. Also prevented certain buffs from progression properly. Okay, whatever. I don't get this part. I don't get why you would not get an enhanced buff from picking up an enhanced buff. But hey, if you have a normal buff on you. Then minions would sometimes ignore enemy guards that enter the line of sight. That's fixed. And there is some changes about the Draugr as well. Mostly just some effects and some bug fixes. And then the change here. Draugr Spoon. Increase the amount of damage mitigation that structures receive from this buff from 5% to 7% per stack. So from 15% to 21% in total. So that is just going to be a little bit more impactful. I think that's a good change. To be like... I would say there were some situations where I saw this being killed, but the Draugr being killed, but it was rarely for the purpose of the structure protection. And I think that is what they really want to achieve here, that it's actually getting more focused for that. It's just hard to do if you're like in a structure defense and your hunter is not exactly in the middle of their lane, then they might not get to the Draugr. And they probably shouldn't be in the middle of their lane because they probably should be helping defending. So those situations are kind of rare. Then we have support starter items as the first item change, and this is a big one. War Flag, Sentinel's Gift, and Benevolence now require only 1,250 gold to upgrade, but still remain at only level 17. I think what this may mean is that it's even more likely that other classes are going to pick them up, because that means the step to just outright buy the upgraded version at level 17 is even easier. Because of that, they're making some other changes as well. We'll get to that in a bit, but just throwing this out there, this is a bit of a risky one, I would say. Even though obviously understandable, because supporters just don't get that much gold. Bracer of Radiance has a new artwork and has the movement speed aura increased from 10% to 15% on the base version, and then has the movement speed increased by the same on the enhanced version, but also has the power aura increased from 10 to 15% on the enhanced version. I think that's interesting. Harris actually said, they said on the patch notes, in the patch show, that they saw Bracer actually having a fair bit of success when it was picked up. It's just not very popular. So it's interesting. Maybe the metrics are telling us things that we don't know here. Maybe we should just be building Bracer of Radiance and dropping it at Fire Giants and winning games that way. I think it's a really weird item to build, because in many situations you won't really feel the impact that much. It's just like, I guess you can now kind of use it like a sprint, but not really. I don't know. It's kind of weird. But I can see, with this amplification, that definitely gets value, 15% power. And we get another item later on that may actually make this more interesting when you combine them. So we'll talk about that again in that context. Sundering Spear against another nerf. Increase the cooldown from 110 seconds to 125 seconds per instance. So 250 seconds for both shots. And the same thing for the upgrade. And also decreasing the damage amplification from the upgrade from 10% to 7%. I think these are pretty heavy nerfs. Harris did say, or Ajax did say, that they're considering to nerf it more if necessary, because it's still so popular, like so overwhelmingly popular, but at the same time they're worried that if they nerf it just a little bit too much, it just returns to its meme status, basically. So it's gonna be hard to find that middle ground. I think these nerfs sound like they are a lot. and they might be enough. So we'll see how it plays out after this. I would be surprised if it gets another nerf right after, but who knows? Maybe it'll just stick around. Maybe it's just too persistent right now. Terrane's coin gets another nerf here. I think it got a nerf a while ago from 90 to 80 power, and now it gets from 80 to 70, I think. This change also applies to the evolved form. So yeah, it gets less HP 5, that was because of the bug, and it gets less power now. And it's just because it was still rushed so much that it makes no sense not to nerf it when it's not meant to be the only item that gets rushed. Frostbite Hammer, this is extremely interesting and surprising to me. So Frostbite Hammer is not specifically nerfed because of the pro level of play, but rather because of the mid levels of play, because of ranked, because of casuals. So it's been used there a lot according to Hi-Res, and with a lot of success. So they're decreasing the health from 300 to 250 and decreasing the movement speed, slow, from 30 to 25% for melee attacks, as well as 20 to 15% for ranged attacks. Surprising amount of nerfs at once for an item that, for me personally, like, it wasn't exactly on the top of my radar, at least. Like, yeah, Frostbite Hammer isn't terrible, but it's not the first item I would throw in a build. It's not like something I would prioritize. It's something I would slap in when I feel like the enemy's getting away too much. On solo laners primarily. So I found this very interesting. I found this a very surprising change. I don't know. I don't know how I feel like nerfing around mid levels of play, but I guess it makes sense. Like, if it's not built that much in the Pro League, it doesn't affect the Pro League that much as well if it's nerfed, because it wasn't built that much in the first place. And if it in another place it was built a lot more, then maybe that makes sense. Then maybe that is the right approach for this item. I can't say. I find it a bit surprising, but at the same time, it's not the end of the world. Like, it's still okay as an item, I suppose. 5% slow loss isn't that big, though I would say the 50 health loss does hit it quite hard when it doesn't have that many defensive stats. But yeah, maybe they just want to bring up some other hammers as well. Jade Empress Crown gets an increased physical power reduction from 20 to 25%. This makes perfect sense to me. I always say that this is like an item that is directly competing with Sovereignty for supports, and Sovereignty is just usually better, and this has to compete with it throughout the game, and in order to have that, you have to have a certain degree of power reduction. There's always this like tipping point where one or the other becomes better, and right now I think Sovereignty is still pretty fine the lead, so I think this is a very acceptable buff here. We'll see how it plays out. Hydroenemy Line gets a bit of a revert. Increase the physical protection from 75 to 80, that's just 5, not that big of a deal, but decrease the protections needed per stack from the block from 120 to 100. I think this is a good change. They specifically stated they do not want to return to the reflected damage. They want to keep that on abilities as best, but not on items. And yeah, that will not be coming back. But the block is coming back and is going to be more accessible again. The problem was that really it was so hard to even get to 2 stacks that no one bothered anymore. So now having this again with the potential to get up to higher stacks at a reasonable time in the game, I think means that this will be picked up by certain supports again against oppressive hunters, or by certain solos as well. And I think that's a good change. I'm very glad that this is happening. I think the item was just too bad before, and it is often was something that you felt when you're looking to counter any basic attackers, really, that there weren't really that many great options in terms of items that you could use, and Hydroenemy Line making a return in that regard is very good. Bulwark of Hope gets a shift towards more of a tank item. Increase the magic protection from 60 to 80. That is big, 20 magic protection in one shift. And along with that, the shield provided by Bulwark of Hope will now be based on 15% of the holder's maximum health, rather than 150 plus 10 per level. So to put that in perspective, previously this would give 350 health shield, whereas now if you had like a squishy with like 2000 health, you get a 300 health shield. But then if you have a tank with 3000 health, you'll get a 450 health shield. So this shield can ramp up quite a lot with your health and make you quite beefy. And I think especially the combination, you Hydroenemy Line, Bulwark of Hope, Could mean that if you're not looking to go for utility and you just want to survive, you have some very nice options in that regard now, because you're going to soak up so much damage with these guys, especially if you combine them. That could be very interesting. Obviously not necessarily what many players go for, but I mean, just do these two and then Mystical Mail and just don't die and do constant tick damage. Could be interesting. Then we have Stone of FAL. Stone of FAL, I think, is a bad item in design, and they want to make it work in the current design. I think what they should do is scrap the passive again and go back to the drawing board. They don't want to do that. They want to make this passive work. And I think they're kind of doing that. And they're doing that by brute force. They're buffing everything about the item and making it viable that way. So the health goes up from 150 to 200. Physical protection goes up from 30 to 40. Magical protection goes up to from 30 to 40. So this is a massive amount of stats for the price point as well. I think the item being 2,350 gold. If I compare that to, say, Spirit Robe, then you have an item that has, by default, a higher price tag, the now exact same protections, but does not provide you with additional health, and provides you with 15% damage mitigation when you get hit by hard crowd control. On the other hand, Stone of FAL, with its passive now stacking for 3% instead of 2%, can go up to 18% mitigation, because on the last point, the mitigation doubles. 18% mitigation for 10 seconds is pretty big, and as far as I'm aware, you can restack it quite quickly again. I think you can restack it right after again. Actually, yeah, I think there's very little downside to this item now, and it's purely because of stat bloat. So I would expect that we can see this on some guards that can utilize it. Like, the problem is still, right, you need to get 3 basics off, and not every guard can do this effectively. But, you know, if you have some, like, somewhat attack canceling support or solo, that is magical, then I think this is big. I think this has too many stats now. Like, this provides so much for so little downside, and all you have to deal with is the janky passive, and all you have to do is really, like, keep it up at 2 stacks if you can, and then just get the 3rd stack the moment you go into a fight. Athena Reach, Sylvanas, long-range basic attacks, that type of stuff. Tiamat, ranged basic still, if you want to go for a tankier Tiamat build. All very, very strong. I think 18% mitigation for 10 seconds is just too much. And 20% crowd control reduction as well. Like, it really gets everything. I don't think that is how an item should be made effective. But I think it is effective now. It's just the stats are just too good to ignore it. I just don't think that's the right approach. I think the approach should be, we're looking to make the passive interesting enough for people to pick the item up with normal stats and not with absolute stat bloat. Like, kind of annoying that it was handled that way. Maybe I'm wrong here. Maybe the passive will be so undervalued even now that it's not getting picked up. But my feeling is that people are going to figure out, okay, the mitigation is actually insane and super long, and there are too many guards that can somewhat use it, and they're going to use it. Like, I don't know if it's going to be like something stupid like Zhong Kui, who can double stack it, who's going to use it the most or something. But yeah, just a bit wild. Not really a fan of how this was approached, but it is what it is. Blackthon Hammer. Increased physical power from 35 to 40, and increased health from 350 to 400. A pretty solid buff here, like double buff both in the aggressive capabilities and in the defensive capabilities. To be fair, I haven't seen a Blackthon Hammer in I don't know how long. Always overshadowed by Sledge, really. And giving it a bit of reason to be built, yeah, not wrong in my eyes. So I think that is a reasonable buff. That is the type of level of buff that I would like to see to an item that is underused. Staff of Myrddin increased the duration of the passive from 4 to 6 seconds. If you were around for PTS of Staff of Myrddin, then you may know that was like originally, I think, maybe it was even longer originally, but originally it was longer than 4 seconds anyways, either 6 or 8 seconds, and it started at a higher cooldown reduction. It's still starting at the lower cooldown reduction, that is unchanged, so it's still not as strong as it was on PTS, but with a longer duration, that means the passive fizzles out slower, and you will have the reduction quite a fair bit, and maybe this will help you get an additional ability in. So this could become more interesting now. I'm still not really a fan of the passive here either. I actually thought the old passive was better, because this one is just going to remain very, very hard to balance. It's either going to be underwhelming or very easily overwhelming. Yeah, with a goal of it being used by everyone, it's either going to be so good that everyone uses it or not enough potential behind it and then no one uses it, kind of. That's my impression. But well, next change is much cooler. Dominance gets the basic attack bonus penetration increased from 10 to 15%. I actually wanted to write this down because this is actually super cool. Because it means, because this penetration goes over the cap, you can have a total of 55% penetration on basic attacks, not on abilities, which I think could be extremely strong, and I think that could be used very well. It's really a question of which items are going to be used. You can add Celanta's bow, you can have a silver branch at that, for example. Like, we'll see where the other pen comes from, but since this can go over cap, I would imagine that some build will come up that maybe tries to achieve exactly that, then throw a kin size in there, and then you basically shred every tank completely. But then you also have to invest your entire build into shredding tanks, so it's not like you will do insane damage to squishies compared to, say, someone building crit. But, you know, in some games you just want to shred tanks. So I think it's fair enough. And at the same time, it's also different from execution. It's going to provide the shred only for you and not for your team. So it has its balancing measures built in. But I have been a fan of Dominance. Well, I initially thought it wasn't a great item. For a while, I then changed my mind on that very much and thought that this is even an interesting item to build very early in the game, in place of Transcendence for just the quicker power spike essentially and the more even curve into late game. So we will see. We will see if people actually want to pick it up. I could imagine that it's not immediately going to get picked up, but I could imagine that the pros figure out their way to go about it and pick it up in certain situations at least. Vamshot gets a nerf with the magical power being decreased from 30 to 25. It was buffed before, it was a little bit too strong, it was just oppressive. Fair enough. I thought it was a fun run for Vamshot. I think that item didn't really get enough attention for a long time because it was a bit underwhelming. So I thought that the buffs were warranted, but I can also see why the nerf is warranted at this point. Bloodsoaked Shroud, the upgrade, also gets a bit of a nerf, decreasing the health proc from 2% to 1.5%, and the mana heal proc from 2% to 1.5%. Now, I feel like this especially targets solo laners as well, who've been using this quite successfully, so that they will have a little bit less extra sustain in late game with their higher health base in general, where the percentage just does more. Conduit Gem gets its magical power increased from 25 to 30. It's been a wild ride for Conduit Gem from like the top tier item to gradually fading out in middle lane and bringing it back a little bit, as I think is a good idea. And I think now we may actually get to a point where we see a little bit of all three starters in mid lane for mages. So I think that's very good. Mannequin Scepter, this is getting a very great change in my opinion. There is now some extra forgiveness for the health restore when an enemy dies shortly after the burn debuff fades. This should help this item feel more consistent when spreading the burn around on multiple targets during early jungle clear. So this doesn't actually change anything about the damage, but it means that when the ticks run out, there's still a little bit more time for you to get the heal, which for example means if you use your basic attacks on some minions and then use your 3 as low key, then normally the ticks would run out right before the 3 finishes and you will not get any heals if the enemy isn't dead from the tick. And then maybe if your 3 finishes them off, that won't matter. You won't get the heal. And now with this little tolerance threshold, that might just be enough for him to get those extra hits off, or the last hit off, and then get the heal back when Mannequin procs from it. So I think this is a great change, and I thought that was a very frustrating factor about the item, so I really like this. Bumba's Dagger gets a change, and that affects all the other Bumba's things as well. So Bumba's Dagger, they want this to be the best jungle clearing item, and that's not it anymore. So it's now getting a little bit of a damage increase for jungle camps. So the basic attack damage on jungle camps is increased from 20 to 25, and the ability damage on jungle camps is increased from 30 to 35. Now, what's interesting to me here is that this is technically like the least aggressive option, And the least aggressive option for someone, like when it comes to looking for clear, would be something that basic attack jungles would normally be building, but they're building Eye. And these stats here don't really change that significantly because the upgrades are all more in the direction of ability-focused characters. So it's not really much of a point in that. And ability-focused characters are more likely to just go into something that gives them damage early because they usually have better early scalings. So that makes this whole thing a little bit complicated and maybe not quite fulfill the purpose that it's intended to have, I guess. But that aside, we're getting some very interesting changes. Bumba's Hammer gets its cooldown reduction reverted to 20% instead of 10%. I think that's very reasonable. The penetration is off that item. So it's still not the Bumba's Hammer it used to be. It's not the terrifying, overwhelming Bumba's Hammer that we had at the start of the season. But it's more in line with having usability for junglers, I would say. Like the problem was that towards the end, it was still built on some very CDR heavy, cancel heavy junglers that can abuse this item, and I think Hunbats as well. But outside of that, it was like more looked at by solos that skipped starters than actual junglers. And I think bringing a little bit of the cooldown reduction back here can change that. Though I would have almost rather seen the 10% pen, which I think, offers a little bit more aggression and doesn't make it so that you struggle so much with building CDR in your build earlier than Bumba's Hammer, since you're kind of limited by the cap that you will hit with this 20% effect. At the same time, I think they don't want to bring the 10% pen back. They could do 5% or something, I don't know. But yeah, I think it's so good that Bumba's Hammer is getting a little bit of a buff at least. I would still like for this item to be more adjusted in internal cooldown, so that, for example, a god like Tsukiyomi cannot abuse it that much in comparison to others, so it's just a little bit more balanced between gods. Essentially what they're trying to do with Staff of Merdin, but with internal cooldown somehow. And then, probably the biggest change of the patch, Bumba's Spear. No longer provides 200 health. Good. It never made any sense on that item to have health. Bumba's Hammer has health still. That's the effective item now. But Bumba's Spear is now an aggressive option. And I'm pulling up the current stats on the other side here just to make sure I'm not missing anything. So it provides 10% penetration now. It also provides 10% cooldown reduction, by the way. It basically gives the old Bumba's Hammer stats partially. It provides 70 physical power now instead of 60, and it provides 105 magical power instead of 90. That's all great. That gives it just a little bit more power, but again, it lost 200 health as well, so it lost quite a fair bit of stats, and then in return you get power and pen. Good enough, but then the power buff duration is increased from 10 seconds to 30 seconds. And this is huge, but also good, because I think that actually gives this item a decent amount of value. It was built sometimes before, but it was really, really, really rare. This effect procs of jungle camps, structures, and jungle bosses. And it works now, actually, even on structures. So all you need to do is clear one jungle camp, and you will get this effect. Which, for example, also means you could do this on the way to, say, Fire Giant. You just clear out a jungle camp real quick and then get the buff effect. And this means that once you use this item, it still makes sense for you to go into the jungle just to get the amplification and then gank, and then you'll get 10% extra power. And the 10% extra power is that what I was thinking earlier with the new bracer, Radiant Bracer, I think it's called. I kept forgetting the name. Is that you could get a total of 25% power if you're in that bracer area and you got this spear buff on you, and say that is the case around Fire Giant if you're about to contest it. That's a massive amount of extra power that you're getting, basically just for existing there. And that is obviously very scary for contesting as well. So I think this is a very interesting change, and I like to see where this goes. If this is actually being picked up by ability-based aggressive junglers, I think that would be very cool. Just now you can actually do things where you kill a camp and then you do a gank, right? You can kill this with Thor, and use it with Thor, kill a camp, and then walk over a little bit, and then do the dunk, and then still have the power effect while you have the gank. So that's pretty cool. But at the same time, you're getting the item at a stage of the game where you don't only want to be jungle clearing, so that kind of balances it out. You're not going to sit in the jungle and constantly have this buff at that point of the game. So I really, really like this, and I think this is a very interesting change. Protector of the Jungle also gets a buff / revert. The power is reverted back to 15%, the power increase instead of 12%. So another way to get more power, but this one obviously limited to the jungle itself, whereas with the spear, you can go out of the jungle and keep the effect. The protection increase, on the other hand, remains at 12% instead of the 15%. The power of the item itself is also reverted from 55 back to 65 now, and the magical power goes back to 100 from the nerfed 80. So 65 power on this item I think is also pretty strong, and we might see, I guess, more Protector of the Jungle. I would say that was not as unpopular. So yeah, the problem was just generally that a lot of junglers were just selling their starters selling their starters without upgrading them because the upgrades were just not worth it in comparison, and now they should be, hopefully. And then Seer of the Jungle also gets its physical power increase from 60 to 70, magical power from 90 to 105, and the passive duration of you being able to see wards is increased from 15 to 20 seconds. Still can't quite see this item being used outside of competitive much, but yeah, in competitive it has already been used, and not that much, but it has been used, and maybe we'll just see it again, But at the same time, I think maybe also go more towards a Bumba Spear meta, and honestly, that would be fair because Bumba Spear was dead for so long. So if it gets this spotlight, that's fair enough. Gilded Arrow gets a buff, decrease the cost from 700 to 650, and increase the basic attack power from 15 to 20. I think the second part is very reasonable, especially. I think at the moment, honestly, all hunter starters actually have decent value. This is maybe a bit of a controversial take. Obviously, there's always one that overpowers the others in terms of popularity, and that happens to be Leather Carl right now with the bow build. But I think this can shift very quickly. I think the hunter items are not that far apart that one or the other couldn't be picked up, depending on your playstyle, depending on what point of the game you play for. But since people usually follow what's happening in the Pro League, we just don't see that much. But I think outside of the Pro League, you could, for example, capitalize off a Gilded Arrow in late game much better at the moment as well. But this buff helps this as well, so I'm happy with it. I think it's a good change. Maybe brings Gilded Arrow a little bit more back into the presence of being used in duo lane. Just awareness of people maybe, and then based on that, we might see a bit of a return, even though normally these changes take a while with hunters, and a lot of people stick to the one that they've seen being meta, being Leather Carl right now. Wildfly gets another buff, increasing the gold reward from 8 to 10. It won't matter. It's still significantly less than the other items. In my opinion, that won't make a difference. I don't see how, at least, because it's just too hard to proc it in most situations. Then Malevolence, the experience and gold gain from anytime you would gain any XP or gold is reduced by down to 85% now instead of down to 90 by 15% now. And these 15% are now rewarded to an ally within 40 units of you. So no XP or gold is lost as long as you have an ally nearby, but if you're on your own, you're going to lose an extra 5% on both, which is mainly so that people wouldn't pick it up earlier, just to build into other things later, and just take that little hit on the XP and gold and say, I'd rather have the passive gold and I want to have this for survivability or whatever. So I think this is a good change as well, to just discourage that a little bit. It won't fully discourage it, but at least they will make it more punishing that way. Animosity gets the damage proc nerfed from 4% of your maximum health to 3% of your maximum health. Animosity is seeing a little bit of play in solo lately, and Hi-Rez didn't really want that. They said they want this to be like a funny meme that supports can go into, but not so much something that is used to stomp from solo or abused by certain gods in some ways. and therefore that's getting a nerf. And that makes sense also with some other items from this patch, like some other changes that would otherwise like essentially help it out in some ways as well. So yeah, I think this is fine. Then we have Tiamat. Tiamat still performing very, very well. It's less about the minions now and just more about the strength, the raw strength of the god itself. And that is exactly what they're tackling here. Consume has magical power scaling reduced from 60 to 50% and outburst from 50 to 40%. Talking about the melee stance here primarily, so the tanky stance. So I think that's fair enough. That stance is really cool, like relatively short cooldowns, I think, relatively decent damage at least still, and obviously comes with a lot of other added utility. So yeah, changing that up a bit and reducing the scalings, totally fair in my opinion. Ragin, Raiju decrease tick bounce damage from 14 to 50 to 14 to 42, just a little bit stronger at the top end here on the higher levels. So this is a middle point between the original values and the most recent buff, just to balance them out a little bit. Ragin has been doing very well, has been very popular. So having a little bit of a nerf there once again, also very fair. Yamaganda gets a bunch of changes. First of all, his basic attack damage is increased from 10.4 to 11.2. That should be noticeable because his ticks are so quick that you should actually be able to feel that. Then Venomous Haze increased the base damage per tick from 5 to 45 to 10 to 50. Especially the starting ticks here, obviously relevant because it's typically it's not the ability that you're looking to level first. And if you're not leveling it first, then it's gonna do very low tickle damage at the start for a long time. So now that's a little bit more. Consuming Bellow increased the magical power scaling of the bonus damage from 5% to 10% per stack. So this is up to 30% extra damage instead of otherwise 15% extra damage. And also increased the duration of the empowered basic attack buff from 1.5 seconds to 2 seconds per stack. So also here up to 6 seconds on this buff. A whole set of changes of Yamaganda already received multiple changes, and I thought the old changes might have been enough. They turned out definitely not to be, so he's getting more, fair enough. Might also be that because of the Vamshot nerf, they're getting a bit heavier on these ones, because otherwise maybe Vamshot could help him out a little bit, but like this, he kind of has to rely more on his own stats. So let's see what happens with them. I would not be surprised if Yamaganda in the near future comes back into the meta with all the buffs that he's getting over time here. Then we have Bellona. Bellona just not really coming back. Like there were assumptions that might happen, like through various changes, Death Toll, for example, and stuff, but it never really happened. So now she gets a physical power scaling on Shield Bash increased from 40-50%, and more importantly, the cooldown reduced from 15 to 14 seconds, and also the cooldown of her Scorch reduced from 20 to 16 to 18 to 14 seconds. So 2 seconds of all ranks, which in my opinion is pretty huge. I don't know, like, I feel like this should be enough, right? I think cooldown reduction changes on Bellona are always very, very impactful for her meta positioning. At the same time, as much as I feel like this should be enough, she's also a very fickle god in when she feels strong and when she doesn't, and how she competes with other solo laners, AA-focused solo laners especially, in order to like establish her place. Amaterasu, also not having been seen that much, as far as I'm aware, gets a buff to the attack speed of her basic attacks for the scale in terms of scaling per level from 1.2 to 1.4%. I think this is very reasonable because she applies a passive with that, so making it a little bit faster with that is very fast, so you can actually get to utilize the passive. And then the cooldown of the dash, Glorious Charge, is reduced from 18 to 16 seconds. Also quite significant here, but at the same time, keep in mind, this is an ability that can be stopped, so you won't be able to use it super effectively in every situation. So I think having a bit of a shorter cooldown is fair. Skadi hasn't been meta for, I don't even know how long, but quite a while, and she's getting a buff, increasing the basic damage of the Rise of the Hand of Kalder from 40 to 80 to 50 to 80, so early ranks should be a bit more oppressive. And Permafrost reduced the cooldown from 18 to 16 seconds. So I think that is very fair because Skadi is meant to be strong early, put up pressure early with Kaldor, and then buffing Kaldor specifically for that obviously helps. And Permafrost also gives her some survivability. So I think that those are great changes for her. Thoth, Glyph of Pain, is very interesting. Increase the base bonus basic attack power from 10 to 30 to 20 to 40. So this is for basic attacks only, meaning this is not only for himself but also for his team, but will not that significantly increase his damage output very likely. Interesting change. I don't know if we'll actually feel this one, but I like it. Baba Yaga gets a quality of life change, home sweet home. While in the ultimate, Baba Yaga can now walk through minions. No more getting body blocked by a small minion standing in your way. That is fantastic. That was super annoying beforehand. So I have a feeling I probably still have the like urge to go around the minions because that's what you get used to. But yeah, you don't have to do that. You just can walk straight through them. Susano, Wind Siphon, increase base damage from 80 to 180 to 90 to 210. And increase the damage of Jet Scream from 20 to 60 to 25 to 65 per tick. Quite significant damage buffs for him overall, in combination with both Bumba's Hammer getting a revert as well as Bumba's Spear being buffed. I think Susano mains will have a field day with this. He hasn't really been that popular, but this could bring him back. I mean, that's a lot of extra base damage for an assassin. That's all I will say. RTO. Life tap Maul Prey, decreased cooldown from 12 to 10 seconds, very, very short, especially for a stand swapper. And Heavy Charge increased her charge speed from 75% increased movement speed to 100% increased movement speed. I really like these changes. I always love RTO changes anyways. I know she hasn't been all that meta, but I think this is just an enjoyable guard to play. And I really like these buffs. I think these buffs might be impactful. And make a difference, especially the movement speed on the Heavy Charge, because that also means that you can lock enemies down better, not only escape, which I think is something she sometimes struggles with because she doesn't really have the same heavy engage that others have, unless she buys Blink, and then obviously it's on a long cooldown. Kuzenbo gets a buff to the Nene Kappa, increasing the base damage of the throw from 70 to 210 to 80 to 240. Cool, I like this. Just a little bit more Kuzenbo. I enjoy it. It's not too crazy as well, so I think it's reasonable, and I like it. Yeah, I think Kuzenbo was a bit underwhelming. Hasn't really been seeing that much play, even though he has seen some play still. But yeah, I think this should bring him on the right track. I mean, this is like 30 damage towards the end. That's quite solid. And Naja, Flaming Spear, decreased the cooldown from 18 to 14 seconds to 14 seconds on ranks. He has been shifted around a lot compared to some other guards, so he really needs to find his place again. And the cooldown on Flaming Spear, to be honest, was very long for what the ability does. It's obviously a factor here with the heals, so that especially in early you can use them often, and that might be something that, yeah, I think this may be noticeable, though it'll be more of a subtle impact, I guess, because it's damage or anything like that wasn't exactly touched. So these are all the changes. A lot of stuff here. Very interesting overall. I'm excited to see all of this in game. I think this is very, very interesting. I think this was a good patch overall. Most of the changes are good. It's nothing I can like think of from the top of my head right now that I'm like really, really missing, where I'm thinking, okay, this needed to be in this patch but isn't in it. Like, I think especially the jungle was buffed in a very good way here. Which I think people have been waiting for a while now. I've seen quite a few complaints about that. And yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing this on live. If you'd like to see more, feel free to click the sub button and maybe the bell. Though I will give you a warning that there might be a fair few New World videos in the near future, before we return to more SMITE stuff. Even though, obviously, we'll definitely at least do the Kryptos video first. And with that, thank you guys so much for watching. I hope to see you for the next one soon. Sloth out.